One of the important aspects within Excel is to figure out how to utilize specific formulas using various parameters. Within this exercise, we feature surveys for restaurants. You'll notice here that there are a number of names assigned, as well as a number of survey scores for 3 different restaurants. We need to determine whether we want to go to these restaurants or not. So how do we figure this out? First, let's decide whether we want to use our sum function or our average function. We can use our sum function to calculate the average of these 10 specific survey numbers. We would need to do our sum of those specific areas divided by 10. We would then get the result of 6.7. However, it is much easier to use the average function when we are finding an average for a number of areas. So we type equals average bracket, and we need to select our range, which is the same specific range we used before. Close bracket. Now we get the same result of 6.7. We click back within the cell B15, and we autofill over into C15 and D15. You'll notice that these result in the averages for each of these specific areas. We then will autofill throughout the rest of that row to reach out to cell 9 and 15. You'll notice errors within F15, J15, and K15. Go through and delete these, as we do not need those averages, as they are both empty cells and names. Also E15, which is another empty cell we can delete. So now we have the average scores for all of these specific areas. We're now asked to find out whether or not we should go to these specific restaurants. We are given the assumption that food should be considered 60% of our survey, service should be considered 30% of our survey, and atmosphere should be considered 10% of our survey. So we need to create a formula. We select our food, B15, and we multiply this by 0.6 for the 60% that we want to consider food to be important. We then have to add 30%, in this case, our service, multiplied by 0.3 to account for the 30% importance we are giving to service. Next, we need to add our atmosphere within D15. We are only giving this 10% consideration when doing our rating. Once you have that formula in, again, you can check the formula bar to make sure that you're putting the formula in correctly. We put enter. It has now weighted our survey to give us a result of 6.31. We should then autofill throughout the rest of this row. Delete D16, E16, F16, G16, and I16. The correct information you will need for the second restaurant should appear in H16. We then go through and also delete J16, K16, L16, and N16. You'll notice the appropriate information now sits in M16. So what does this mean? We're given the information that if a restaurant scores greater than 7, that we should go to the restaurant. If it is less than 7, we're told we should not go to the restaurant. So how do we specifically figure out how to determine whether or not to go? Yes, we can simply look at the numbers, but how do we do it within Excel? We should use a logical ifs function where we test specific values. So first, we need to determine whether this is true or not. So our first logical test, we will click on our C16, and we will see if the number is greater than 7. You'll see it's already telling us here that it is false. But what if the value is true? As I mentioned, we are determined to go if the value is greater than 7. So within the value if true first parameter, type go. We then need to figure out what happens if it's less than 7. So we again click on C16 to create our second test within the ifs. And now we need to determine what the value is if that is true. So we do not go if it is less than 7. That is our function. Once we click OK, you'll notice the formula up in the formula bar puts these within quotes. If you were to simply type out this function within that cell, that is how you would reference them, with quotes for these specific parameters. So you notice, less than 7, we do not go. So let's auto-fill that through. And we only want to have something within H17 and M17. So let's go through and delete all of the cells we do not want information. One area, there is a go. We finally want to determine whether or not something is superior or not. With this, we want to use what is called an AND function. We utilize our AND function, which tests for multiple things. So first, we need to call on B15 to see if it is greater than 7. We then use a comma to separate each of our logical things we are checking. We then select C15 to see if that is greater than 7. Another comma for another logical parameter. We select D15 to see if that is greater than 7. We close out this parameter. We will either get a true or false populate within this cell. You'll notice because all of them are not greater than 7, we get a false result. We drag this formula through, and again, we need to delete our cells so that only H18 and M18 now have information in them. What do you notice here? All of the numbers within this section are greater than or equal to 7. So we now need to change for M15 and add an equals. For M15 is equal to 7. Once we change that parameter, it now changes to true. So we now want to determine whether or not these are specifically superior. We need to use an if function. So within C19, add your if function to determine whether or not C18 is true. If it is, we should have a result populate of superior. So if C18 is true, the word superior will come up. You'll notice it says false because it is not superior. All of the numbers are below 7. We then autofill the formula through. We only want H19 and M19, and you will notice within M19 the word superior appears because all of our parameters are equal to or greater than 7. And now you've determined whether or not you should go to each of these 3 restaurants and whether or not they are superior based on our assumptions of 60% is food importance, 30% is service importance, and 10% is the importance of the atmosphere of the restaurant.